Today I'm revealing photos I took in Switzerland back in 2018 when I was still starting out in photography and roast them because I'm going back in a couple of weeks and we all need a reminder on how not to do things. So to do this, we're going over the photos and I'll try to point out the common themes of mistakes that I think about 99% of beginner photographers out there make. So let's just get into it. Okay, so this first image was taken on my first day in Geneva, and mainly I took it because, well, I found that it was already sunset, it was golden hour, and then there were a lot of birds flying around that part of the image, so I thought it was going to be a nice snap, but then I completely forgot composition. One of the few things that you really need to think about in photography, of course, is your composition. The lower part of the image has a lot of distractions. And the thing about this photo is because it's backlit, so everything's in shadow. So whenever you have a backlit scene, try to make sure that the things in shadow have enough spacing in them. So you can see that the background buildings over here is overlapping with the bridge, so you can't actually tell them apart from this image. And then you can see there's also people here that you don't even notice. So overall, a poorly composed image that is nothing but a travel snap. Okay, so this image was taken on my last day in Zermatt, and I remember I was feeling very excited because I finally saw the peak of Matterhorn. And the previous day I was completely having no visibility and I couldn't see the peak at all. So this was a shot that I really had to take. So let's forget about the fact that I don't have anything interesting in the sky. When you're trying to take photos in a clear blue sky day, it's not going to be the most compelling of images if you're adding so much of the clear blue sky, unless you're trying to go for like a minimalist route. But the main part of concern for me was that this part of the landscape was too bright. You know, your eyes tend to look into the brightest parts of the frame, and then everything else is completely in shadow. But the way I tried to compose was try to make use of this leading line. But then, if you look closely, it's not actually leading your eyes to Matterhorn, because it just cuts off right over here. It doesn't connect in any way, shape, or form going to Matterhorn. So I don't know what I was completely thinking at that time. While it's a shot that I had to take because I finally saw the Matterhorn, I could have done a lot better in terms of composition, to be honest. And I could probably alternatively just zoom in towards Matterhorn. Okay, so in this image, this was taken from the viewing point of Harderkom in Interlaken. And it is a classic example of just being too excited by seeing those epic, beautiful moments, and then you switch onto a wide-angle lens and then try to capture everything within the photo. I mean, I did try to minimize the empty sky, so props for that at least. I tried to take a photo of the mountains because they were very, very impressive. And then I tried to add some of the fog over here. And then I also wanted to show that there was the town nearby. That means when you're trying to add everything within your composition, you sort of don't really know what your subject is, and that is one of the most common beginner mistakes. Similarly, I took the second image from Harderkom, so it was way later in the day, so it was already at the sunset time. But again, I don't really know what I was supposed to look at. There was a beautiful light over here, so that could have been a subject. But then there were some misty mountains as well. But then the mountains themselves aren't really so prominent because they're all in shadow. So I couldn't really figure out which mountain I was really photographing. And then as you can see, this lower part of the image as well is also a distraction because there's nothing there. It doesn't support the image. So it just generally weakens the composition. So I think in these four examples that I've shown so far is that my subject matter wasn't strong enough in the images. There were a lot of distractions, and as a viewer, I didn't really know where I am supposed to look at. And I didn't really have that concept of simplifying my compositions at the time when I was still a beginner. And this shot was taken from the Gornergrat train, I remember, going down back to Zermatt. And then I saw that finally it was clearing up a tiny bit. And then I can see sort of the peak of Matterhorn with some moody clouds on the train. There's no way that I could have shot this again or composed it a lot better. So over here you can see some of the reflections from the windows. But yeah, there's just a ton of distractions. You know, it's just a very, very dirty image. dirty image. And yeah, I actually re-edited this photo, which I think worked out a lot better because I just really removed the distractions and just simplify the compositions and just make do with what I had in frame. So this next image was taken on my very first day in Switzerland, back in Lake Luzerne, and I thought at the time this was a very beautiful lake, and then I have some silky clouds in the background. So I thought that this composition was a nice postcard-worthy shot. But then my main concern is that if I draw a fake line in the middle, you can see that this tower is very, very visually heavy, but then there is nothing to counterbalance it on the opposite side. This next image was also taken in Luzerne by the Chapel Bridge. And again, you can see the two towers over here, and at least this time I had something to at least counterbalance it with the main tower of Chapel Bridge. Although you can argue that if I divide it again into two parts, the right-hand side now is a bit more visually heavy than the left part of the frame. The main drawback about this image, I think, is that I cut off the tip of the tower, and then there were a number of distracting birds over there. Are those birds? Yeah, these are birds. I could have Thanos snapped them and then made them disintegrate in Lightroom with the clone tool. I could have improved the composition a lot better if I moved away further by a few steps. But yeah, having that better spacing within the elements within the frame could have improved this shot a lot better. So this next image was a shot I took just right outside the train station of Engelberg before I went up to the cable cars of Mount Titlis. And the reason why I took it was because it forced beautiful light on the beautiful mountains at the background, and then you have calm lake over here and then a peaceful town over there. The main drawback is that the foreground is completely empty, and I wanted to have some sort of like a reflection shot in this image. But then if you look closely, the water itself is not calm at all, so the reflections were quite weak. So now I'm just left with a giant black blob in the lake, and that's not interesting at all. So to improve this image, yeah, maybe I could have just zoomed in because the lake itself wasn't adding anything in detail, and then just focus on these cool mountains. This shot on its own, if I cropped it like this, it would have been a much better shot already. Okay, so this image was taken once you get off the cable car of Mount Titlis into the viewing point. And at the time, I was just super emotional once I saw these landscapes. I mean, oh my god. Took my breath away, literally and figuratively. This shot, I think it's actually the best one I took during that trip, but it does have its drawbacks because you, as I mentioned, try to be more careful with the edges of your frame. So this rock over here is quite distracting because it doesn't really support the image. And over here you can see some of the details coming out of shadow, but it doesn't piece together well within the overall image. I re-edited the photo a few months ago, or maybe last year or so. And here you go. I mean, I cropped it differently, I adjusted the white balance and increased the contrast, but I think this is a much better image because I removed the distractions from the dominant rock. The shadows over here I eliminated, and these clouds are now framing the main region of the landscapes over here. And then I added sort of like a vignette on the edges. And so I hope you found this video helpful and took away a tip or two. And I'm really excited about my upcoming trip to Switzerland. And I have some photography plans already, and I really hope those come to life. Those are dream bucket list shots. So if you want to see those adventures, then do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.